Take the horse. He's yours. Caleb Roone said it before he could stop himself, before his empty stomach could argue, before the wind could carry the words back down his throat where they belonged. The stranger lying in the dust of the Sonoran flats blinked up at him with eyes the color of river ice, and a thin thread of blood crawled from the corner of his mouth like it had somewhere important to be. "Mister," the stranger rasped, "you don't even know me." "Don't need to," Caleb said. "You're dying." "I ain't." The sun hung fat and copper over the ridge, and the whole world smelled of scorched creosote and something metallic underneath, the smell of a man leaking out onto sand. Caleb's mare, a bay named Junebug, stamped once behind him. She was thin. She was tired. She was the last thing on God's earth he owned outright, and he'd just given her away to a man whose name he didn't know. Two questions rose in Caleb's mind and refused to sit back down. Who was this stranger, out here 40 miles from any town, gutshot and alone with no horse of his own? And what in the devil had made Caleb, a man who'd walked 3 days without water rather than beg, surrender the only thing keeping him upright? The stranger tried to laugh. It came out as a wet cough. "Ain't gonna do me much good. I got maybe an hour." "Then ride it that hour," Caleb said. "Ride it to somebody who can pray over you proper. I got no gift for that." He crouched down. Up close, the man was younger than he'd looked from the ridge, maybe 30, black hair matted with sweat, a jaw shaved clean 2 days back and gone silvery again. His shirt was fine linen once. Now it was a red-brown map of his final hours. A gold chain hung around his neck, and at the end of it, half buried in the dust of his collarbone, was a small key. Not a house key. Something older. Something with teeth cut deep and strange. The stranger caught Caleb looking. His hand, surprisingly quick for a dying man, closed over the key. "You a good man, Cowboy?" "No, sir. I ain't." "Then why give me the horse?" Caleb looked out across the flats. A hawk was circling something dead a quarter-mile off. The wind moaned low through the Ocotillo, and somewhere far behind them, he thought he heard hoofbeats. Might have been his imagination. Might not. "My boy died last winter," Caleb said, and was surprised at how flat his voice came out. "Fever. I rode 2 days for the doctor. Doctor wouldn't come without payment up front. I didn't have it. When I got back," he stopped, rubbed a thumb along the seam of his glove. "There was a man on the road. Passed him. He was hurt. I didn't stop. Told myself I couldn't. Told myself my boy needed me faster." He met the stranger's ice-water eyes. "My boy was already dead when I got home. Been dead since dawn. And that man I passed, I heard later he died before sundown. Nobody stopped for him. Not one soul." The stranger was quiet. "So take the horse," Caleb said. "Maybe you make it. Maybe you don't. But I ain't ridden past another man in the dust. Not while I got legs." The stranger's hand came off the key. It fell open on his chest, palm up, like something surrendering. He was looking at Caleb the way a man looks at a door he wasn't expecting to find in a wall. "Cowboy," he said. "What's your name?" "Roone. Caleb Roone." "Roone." The stranger tasted the word like he was memorizing it. Then, with an effort that made the tendons stand out in his neck, he reached up and lifted the chain off over his head. The little key swung in the sun, catching light like it had been waiting for it. "Take this. I ain't want payment. Ain't payment." Blood on his teeth now, pink foam at the corner. "It's a debt. Debt I never got to pay a man who done for me what you just done. You take this to Silver Fork. Ask for the widow Hallam. Tell her Elias sent it home. She'll know what to do." "Elias what?" The stranger smiled. It was almost peaceful. "Just Elias. That's enough for her." Caleb hesitated. Then he took the key. It was warm from the man's skin, heavier than it looked. He slipped it over his own head and tucked it under his shirt, where it settled cold then warm against his breastbone like it had always meant to be there. "You get in that saddle now," Caleb said, and his voice had gone rough. "I'll walk you till you can't sit no more." He lifted Elias. The man was lighter than a full-grain sack, and got him up onto Junebug. The mare snorted at the smell of blood but held steady, the way she always had, the way she'd held for his boy on that last ride to nowhere. They walked. Caleb led, one hand on the reins, one hand on Elias's knee to keep him upright. The sun bled down the sky. The hoofbeats behind them, Caleb was almost sure now, grew no closer but did not fade. "An hour in," Elias said, very softly. "They're coming for it, Roone." "For what?" "The key." "Who is?" But Elias's head had slumped, and his weight had gone from a man's weight to something heavier and stranger, the weight of a man passing over. Caleb caught him as he slid, laid him down at the base of a mesquite whose shadow was just barely long enough to cover his face. Caleb stood over him a long minute. Then he looked back east, toward the ridge, toward the sound of horses. For riders. Just cresting. And they had seen him. Caleb Roone had known fear before. Fear of hunger. Fear of the winter that took his boy. Fear of a god he wasn't sure was listening. But the fear that moved through him, watching those 4 riders come down off the ridge, was a colder, older thing. The fear of a man who has finally been noticed by something that had been looking for him. He dropped to one knee beside Elias's body. The dead man's eyes were still open, still that river ice blue, staring past Caleb into a sky he no longer needed. Caleb closed them with 2 fingers, the way his mother had once closed his grandfather's, and whispered something that wasn't quite a prayer. Then he pulled Elias's coat off him. It wasn't robbery. It was arithmetic. The coat was fine, too fine for a drifter, dark broadcloth, silver buttons stamped with a wolf's head. Whoever those riders were, they were coming for a man in a coat like that. Let them find a man in a coat like that. Caleb stripped off his own dust-brown duster and wrestled it onto Elias's shoulders. He worked fast, breath sharp in his teeth. He pulled his own hat down over the dead man's face. Then he swung Elias's fine coat over his own back, and it hung heavy and strange on him, the shoulders too broad, the smell of another man's cologne rising off it like a ghost. The key thumped against his chest. He mounted Junebug. He didn't look back. He rode. The riders behind him didn't shout. That was the worst part. Bandits shouted. Lawmen shouted. These men came on in silence, and their silence was more terrifying than any voice. Junebug felt his fear and lengthened her stride without being asked. Good mare. Best mare. An hour later, cresting a low rise, Caleb risked a look. The riders had stopped at the mesquite. He saw 2 of them dismount. Saw one lift the hat from the dead man's face. Saw the rider straighten, sharp and sudden as a shot, and turn slowly in the saddle to scan the horizon. Caleb dropped flat against Junebug's neck and rode. He rode until the mare's flanks were white with foam and his own thighs burned raw. He rode until the copper sun turned to red wine and spilled itself across the desert. Only when full dark came, and the coyotes started their evening argument, did he slide down and lead Junebug into a wash where the walls threw shadow enough to hide them both. He built no fire. He sat with his back against the sand-cool stone and pulled the key out from under Elias's coat. In the last blue of twilight, he turned it over in his fingers. On one side, near the bow, was a tiny engraving, a wolf's head, same as the coat's silver buttons. On the other side, 3 letters scratched crooked and small, as if by a knife tip in a hurry. M.H. Widow Hallam, Caleb murmured. Silver Fork. He'd heard of Silver Fork, mining town 2 days north, up where the desert broke into Pinyon Country. He'd never been. He had no business there. He had every reason in the world to ride the other direction, drop the key down a well, forget the ice-eyed man beneath the mesquite. But then he thought of the road last winter, the man he had passed, the way that man had lifted a hand. Caleb hadn't wanted to remember the hand, and he had for 1 year not remembered it, but here in the dark it came back to him whole. The hand had lifted, and Caleb had ridden past it, and that hand had gone down forever. He would not ride past again. Silver Fork, he said aloud, testing the word. Junebug snorted, as if she'd been waiting for him to make up his mind. At dawn he moved again, keeping to the washes, staying off the ridges. By noon he came upon a Papago woman leading a burro along a game trail. A small woman with a face like a walnut, a red cloth tied around her hair. She looked at him, at his fine dark coat, at the exhaustion in his mare, and she said in careful English, "Man in a coat like that got 4 men killed last spring. You know that?" Caleb's hand went instinctively to his shirt, where the key rested. "Ma'am," he said, "I ain't the man who owned this coat." She studied him. Her eyes were black and unhurried. "No," she said, "you ain't. But you carrying his weather now." She reached into her burro's pack and pulled out a strip of jerky and a gourd of water. She handed both up to him. "Why?" Caleb asked. "Because I passed a man once too," she said. "In the dust. Never stopped." She walked on without another word. Caleb watched her go until she was smaller than a thumbnail against the pale hills, and something in his throat wouldn't quite come loose. He rode. By the third afternoon, he saw the smoke of Silver Fork, a thin gray column bent sideways by the mountain wind. He came down out of the pinyon at dusk, Junebug at a slow walk, both of them bone-tired and half-starved. The town was small, 3 streets crossed like a rough T, a chapel with a bent cross, a saloon with a name he couldn't read from where he sat. He stopped a boy carrying a bucket. "Widow Hallam." The boy went pale. "Mister," the boy said, "you don't want to go up there." "I do. They've been watching her place 3 days now. Men from out of town." Caleb felt the key against his chest, cold as a coin from a deeper river than the boy would ever know about. "Where?" he said. The boy pointed up the hill. A small house, white once, gray now, a single lamp already burning in the window against the coming dark. And in the alley across the street, half hidden in the blue shadow of the mercantile, Caleb saw the shape of a man on a horse. Watching. Still. Silent. The wolf head buttons on Caleb's borrowed coat caught the last of the sun. The watcher straightened. Caleb did not run. Running was what a hunted man did, and hunted men died. He had learned that from his father, a Union scout who'd come home, missing 3 fingers and full of quiet, terrible lessons. Walk when they expect you to bolt. Look them in the eye when they expect you to bow. And when the shooting starts, be already moving. He turned Junebug up the street at a walk. Not fast. Not slow. The watcher in the alley didn't follow, not yet. But Caleb felt the man's eyes on his back the way a deer feels a rifle, and the muscles between his shoulder blades gathered themselves into a hard knot. The widow's house sat behind a low picket fence gone silver with weather. A gate hung crooked. A single juniper leaned against the western wall, as if trying to hear what happened inside. Caleb tied Junebug at the post, loosened the cinch hole. She'd earned it, and walked up the 3 warped steps to the door. He knocked twice. Silence. Then the sound of something metal being set down, deliberate. Then footsteps. The door opened 4 inches. A woman looked out. She was maybe 40, maybe 50. The desert made ages hard to read, with iron-gray hair pulled back tight and eyes the color of a lake before storm. She had a Colt Navy revolver held low against her thigh, not pointed, not hidden, just present. A statement. "Whatever you're selling," she said. "I ain't." "Ma'am." Caleb took off his hat. "My name's Caleb Roone. I come from the desert south. I got something belongs to you." He reached slow, very slow, for the chain around his neck. Her thumb moved to the hammer of the Colt. He lifted the key clear of his shirt. Her whole body changed. It was a small change. A civilian wouldn't have caught it. But Caleb saw the shoulders drop half an inch, saw the breath go out of her, saw the hand around the Colt loosen, and then, immediately, tighten again, harder. "Where?" she said, and her voice had gone thin as wire. "Did you get that?" "Man named Elias give it to me. 2 days south. He was dying. Said tell the widow Hallam he sent it home. Said you'd know what to do." Her eyes searched his face for a long moment. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found some of it, because she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Get inside," she said. "Now." He went in. She shut the door and threw 2 bolts and slid a beam across it. The room smelled of wood smoke and lamp oil and, faintly, of gunpowder. A room lived in by someone who'd been ready for a long time. She turned on him. Her face was wet, but her hand on the Colt was steady. "Elias was my son." Caleb's breath went out of him. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." He passed easy, ma'am. He passed brave. He give me his horse too." Caleb stopped. "Wait. No. I give him mine. You give him yours." "Yes, ma'am." "You give a dying stranger your last horse." "Yes, ma'am." She sat down suddenly on a low wooden chair, as if her legs had decided the matter for her. She laid the Colt across her knees. For a long time she did not speak. Then she said, without looking up, "Mr. Roone, do you know what that key opens?" "No, ma'am." "You know why 4 men chased my boy across 200 miles of nothing?" "No, ma'am." She lifted her eyes. "My husband was a bank president in Prescott. 10 years ago the Vane brothers robbed his bank and shot him dead across his own desk. They took $40,000 in gold coin. The territory hunted them a year and never found it. You know what?" "No, ma'am." "Because my husband, before they shot him, locked the gold in a strongbox and swallowed the only key. My son cut it out of him, cleaned it, wore it ever since. Been running with it ever since, waiting for the Vane brothers to hang. so the money could go back to the folks it was stole from. She paused. The Vane brothers never hanged. And now they've found my boy. Caleb sat down slowly on the bench by the door. The key was suddenly very heavy against his chest. Ma'am, there's a man watching your house right now. From the alley by the mercantile. I know. There's been one there since Tuesday. There's another behind the chapel. And a third rents a room above the saloon. Three that I've counted. Caleb thought of the 4 riders on the ridge. There's a 4th, ma'am. Somewhere. Her mouth pulled thin. Then he's the one I'm most afraid of. Something moved outside. Caleb was on his feet before he decided to be. He crossed to the window in 2 strides, keeping low, and pulled the edge of the curtain back with 1 knuckle. 3 men were walking up the hill toward the house. Not riding. Walking. Because walking men made no sound of hooves. They wore long dusters. One had a shotgun broken over his arm. One had 2 revolvers belted cross-draw. The third, the one in the middle, was tall and slim and moved like a man who had never once in his life been afraid of anything. On his lapel, a silver wolf's head. That's Judah Vane, the widow said behind him. Her voice was flat, empty of surprise, empty of hope. Come to collect. Caleb let the curtain fall. Ma'am, you got a back door. I got a cellar. Better. Not for what I'm gonna do. He turned. She had stood up. The Colt was in her hand now, and her hand was not shaking. Mr. Roone, my boy trusted you with that key. He didn't have to. He could have died with it around his neck and let the veins claw it off his cooling body. He gave it to you because you gave him something first. Ma'am, I only give him a horse. You give him a reason to believe he'd been right about people. That's worth more than a horse. That's worth more than 40,000 in gold. A boot scraped the front step. Now, she said, cocking the Colt. Let's find out if you're a man who rides past twice. The knock, when it came, was almost polite. 3 slow raps, evenly spaced, the way a preacher knocks on the door of a house of mourning. It was worse than pounding would have been. It was a man announcing that he had all the time in the world. Mrs. Hallam. The voice on the other side was smooth, cultured, mountain cold. I know he's in there. I saw the coat. Caleb looked down at himself. The dark broadcloth. The silver wolf buttons. He had walked up the main street of Silver Fork wearing Judah Vane's dead brother's coat, and he had thought himself clever. I ain't him, Caleb called through the door. The man you're huntin' died 2 days ago in the flats. I buried him under a mesquite. You can go dig him up if you want. A pause, then a low, genuine laugh. Mister, I don't doubt you. My brother was harder to kill than most, but not that much harder. I don't want him. I want the key. Ain't got one. Then open the door and prove it. The widow looked at Caleb. He looked at her. Neither of them moved toward the door. Mrs. Hallam, Judah Vane said, and his voice had gone gentler, which was somehow the most terrifying thing yet. I don't want to burn you out. This town is small. I have neighbors of yours who would rather I did not. Give me the key. I ride away. Nobody else has to be buried this year. Caleb's hand rose to the chain. His fingers closed on the little iron tooth. He thought, $40,000 in gold. In some cellar somewhere. Enough to feed every ranch child in this county for 10 winters. He thought, a man on the road last winter with his hand lifted. He thought, my boy in the bed, already cold, already gone. Mr. Vane, Caleb called. You go on and give me a minute to think. You have 3. Footsteps stepped back off the porch. Not away, just back. Waiting. Caleb turned to the widow. He pulled the chain over his head. He held the key out to her on his open palm. Ma'am, this ain't mine. Never was. You take it. You decide. She looked at the key. She did not take it. Instead, she went to a cupboard in the corner and drew out something wrapped in oiled cloth. She brought it to the small kitchen table and unwrapped it. It was a photograph in a tin frame. A man in a good suit. A boy of maybe 17 at his side. The man had a kind, tired face. The boy had river ice eyes. That's my Thomas, she said, touching the man's picture. And that's Elias, the year before Thomas was killed. Elias was 19. He watched his father die on the office floor. He was the one held the cloth to the wound. He was the one heard his father whisper, the key, the key, the key. He was the one who understood. Her finger moved to her son's face. He carried that thing 10 years, Mr. Roone. 10 years of running. 10 years of never sleeping in the same town twice. He never once used $1 of that gold. Not one. He could have. He could have bought a ranch, a wife, a name. He carried it because his daddy told him to. Because it wasn't ours. She looked up. You give my boy back to me for 1 hour, Mr. Roone. 1 hour where he wasn't alone. That's worth more to me than that gold ever was. She closed his fingers around the key. You keep it. You finish it. My Thomas's wish was that gold go back to the folks it was stole from. There's a list in that strongbox. Names. Amounts. My boy memorized it walking. He said it to himself like a prayer. He said the widow Alcott, $40. The Reyes family, 90. The old schoolmaster, 112. 23 names, Mr. Roone. 23 families still waiting. Caleb's throat closed. Ma'am, I ain't a courier. I ain't a lawman. I'm a busted ranch hand who lost his boy. Then you're exactly the man for it, she said. Rich men don't finish this kind of job. Rich men buy it done. This is a poor man's errand. It always was. Outside, a horse whickered. Judah Vane, growing patient in his impatience. The widow reached under her collar and drew out something of her own, a small carved token on a leather thong. A wolf's head, but rougher than the buttons, whittled by hand. She lifted it over her head and slipped it around Caleb's neck beside the key. My Thomas made that for Elias when he turned 10. Elias give it back to me the morning he first rode out. Said, hold this till I come home, Ma. He never did. Her voice cracked, once, and steadied. You wear it now? When it's done, when every one of those 23 families has what's theirs, you bury it. Anywhere. Under any tree. And you tell my boy the debt's paid. Caleb closed his hand over the token. The wood was warm from her skin. Ma'am, I don't know if I can do this. You gave a dying man your only horse, Mr. Roone. You can do this. Judah Vane's voice, from the porch. Time. The widow smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who has been waiting 10 years for one particular door to open. Mr. Roone, she said, get in the cellar. There's a tunnel. My Thomas dug it the year before he died. He knew what he was married to. It comes up in the arroyo behind the chapel. My mare is there. Her name is Ash. She's fresh and she's fast, and she loves running better than eating. Ma'am, what about you? She lifted the colt. She cocked it. She smiled again, a little more warmly this time, in a way that made her look, for one instant, like the girl she had been 40 years before. Mr. Roone, I have been a widow for 10 years, and I have been polite about it for 9 and 11 months. Get in the cellar. Caleb went down the cellar stairs 2 at a time, and behind him he heard the front door of the widow's house open, and he heard her voice, clear, unhurried, almost welcoming, say, Mr. Vane, do come in. I've been expecting you for 10 years. Then the colt spoke. Caleb froze on the 3rd stair. His hand went to his own belt, a battered Remington he hadn't fired in months, and then the widow's voice, hard as flint, rose up through the floor. Roone, you run, or my Thomas died for nothing. He ran. The tunnel was low, timbered, smelling of clay and old potatoes. He half-crawled the length of it, the wolf token banging against his breastbone in rhythm with the key, and above him he heard another shot. A man's shout cut off, a shotgun's roar that shook dust down from the beams. Then 2 more pistol shots, close together, the widow's colt working fast and steady. Then silence. He came up in the arroyo behind the chapel, into cold night air and starlight. The mare Ash was there, saddled, restless, a tall gray with a white blaze, ears pricked toward the town. He mounted. He looked once, only once, back toward the widow's house on the hill. A single window was lit. A shadow moved past it, upright. He couldn't tell whose. He would never know. He rode. He rode north out of Silver Fork under a sky so full of stars it looked broken. He rode 2 days without stopping longer than the mare needed. On the 3rd morning, on a hillside above the Verde, he stopped and buried Judah Vane's coat under a stone cairn and rode on in his own shirt sleeves. The strongbox was where the widow said it would be, under the floor of an abandoned mission chapel 80 miles further on, wrapped in oilcloth, sealed with wax. He knelt in the dust, and the little iron key turned smooth as a whisper, and the lid came up on more gold coin than Caleb Roone had ever seen or imagined seeing. And on top of the coin, folded twice, was a list. 23 names. He read them by candle. He read them again by morning. He said them to himself as he rode, the way Elias had said them. The widow Alcott, $40. The Reyes family, 90. The old schoolmaster, 112. Until they became a kind of prayer, a rosary of debt owed and about to be paid. It took him 2 years. He rode to Prescott first. He found the widow Alcott washing linens for a boarding house at 53 years old with hands cracked open by lie. He gave her $40 in gold and a folded paper that said only, "From your husband's bank." 10 years late. A friend. She wept into her apron and would not let him leave without eating. He found the Reyes family on a hardscrabble farm outside Camp Verde. $90 bought them a milk cow, 2 goats, and a winter without hunger. The old schoolmaster and Jerome had gone blind waiting. Caleb sat with him 3 days and read him the list of the other 22, and the old man wept and said, "So he did remember us. So he did. Name by name, town by town, coin by coin. He was shot at twice and missed both times. He was taken for a thief in Flagstaff and spent a night in jail until a marshal who'd known Thomas Hallam by reputation looked at the list, looked at Caleb's face, and quietly opened the cell door at dawn. On the last name, a young widow in Tucson whose husband had been a teller shot dead beside Thomas Hallam 10 years before. Caleb pressed the final coins into her hand and turned to go. She caught his sleeve. "Mister," she said. "Who are you?" Caleb thought about it. "Ma'am," he said finally. "I'm a man who was riding past, and then wasn't." He rode out of Tucson at dawn on the mare Ash, who by then had carried him nearly 3,000 miles and knew his weight and his moods better than any wife would have. In his saddlebag was 1 gold coin, the last one, and around his neck was the wooden wolf token, worn smooth by 2 years against his skin. He rode north until he came to the mesquite where Elias had died. The tree was still there. The ground beneath it had grown back green in the last spring rains. Caleb dismounted. He dug a small hole with his knife at the base of the trunk. He took the wolf token off his neck. He held it in his palm one long moment, feeling the widow's hands on it, and Elias's hands and Thomas Hallam's hands, and, somehow, his own boy's hands too, though his boy had never touched it. "Debt's paid, Elias," he said. He put the token in the earth. He filled the hole. He set the last gold coin on top of the dirt, and rode away, and did not look back. He did not go home. He had no home to go to. Instead, he rode west, into a country he'd never seen. And in a little town called Willow Creek he took work as a farrier's helper, and in time he became the farrier, and in more time he became something like a father again, to a Papago boy whose mother had died in the flu winter of '87, a boy with black hair and quick hands and eyes that watched a stranger on the road with the exact same weight Caleb's own eyes had once watched. The boy grew up. He learned the trade. He asked, once, about the little iron key his father kept on a nail above the forge. "It opened a box once," Caleb said. "What was in it?" Caleb thought about it a long time. Then he smiled. "Everything I had left to give, and then everything I didn't know I'd been carrying." Years later, when Caleb Roone was buried under a cottonwood in Willow Creek at the age of 71, his adopted son would find, in the old man's Bible, a folded list of 23 names, every one of them crossed out, and beneath the list, in Caleb's careful hand, a single line. "I gave a dying man my last horse. He gave me back the road I rode past. May every man be so lucky as to get his second chance in the dust." The sun was setting when they laid him down. The wind moved through the cottonwood the way it had moved through the mesquite that long ago afternoon. And on the horizon, if a man squinted, he could almost see 2 riders, one on a bay, one on a gray, going out toward a country where no one, ever again, would have to lift a hand from the dust alone.